Hello and welcome. Today we're going to be focusing on DAU or daily active users. These are a count of users that log into your online business daily. And behind me is an area chart that shows a modest example online business that has about 1,100 daily active users that log in on a daily basis. While looking at the volume or count of daily active users is good and provides context, what we're going to do today is we're going to enhance that chart and add two engagement trend lines or metrics that I really love. So when you look at just DAU, all you're seeing is the size of your audience, but your big question is, how engaged is that audience? So what we're going to do is, again, add two trend lines which says, what is the percentage of this DAU that's logging in consecutively? Meaning they've logged in today and at least yesterday and maybe more than that, versus the percentage of the DAU that does not have an active consecutive login streak. So let's move over to MySQL and I'll show you exactly how to do this on a technical level, and then we'll rebuild this analysis in Excel. So the most important thing is we're going to start with a customer logins table. So let me show you this table here. And it's in our mobile games database, which is a database full of SQL tables, and one of them is the fact player logins. So the database name is mobile games database. We're going to call this fact player logins is the name of the table. Now let me showcase a few records to you so you can see what the exact granularity of this data is and what is in this data. So again, we have the customer ID, their login date, and then the total number of sessions, that's an aggregation, and then the total session minutes, which is also an aggregation. So for this analysis, the only two fields we need is customer ID and then login date. And then for any analysis, it's good to kind of truncate your data and say, you know what, we're only going to do this report or this chart for the last 30 days. So instead of taking all historical records, we're just going to truncate this data for the last 30 days, and I'll show you how to do this now in the where clause. So we'll say where this login date is greater than or equal to date add interval -30 day. So this sort of logic right here is fantastic because what it does is it says, hey, what's the current date today? And as of this recording, the current date is December 19th, 2024. And then what it does is it subtracts 30 days from December 19th, 2024 and says only take login dates that are greater than or equal to 30 days ago, meaning it's only going to return data for the last 30 days. So this is super useful, very convenient. I use it all the time. And if you want to see that it worked, let me do this. We can run a distinct on dates, and it'll bring back the last 30 dates. And there it is. Okay, great. So let's get back to the rest of this query. So I'm going to add the customer ID back in, and then the dates that they logged in. And we're going to do something like this. Let me prefix this field with a comma. Okay. And we'll get back to where we were. Fantastic. So just to summarize, this data is each customer and their login dates. So you can have a customer with several and different login dates. So one customer may have logged in both yesterday and today, and that'll be reflected in this data. Okay, so let's move forward from here. We're gonna call this entire subselect logins. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna do a self join, or we're gonna join this data from this subselect back to this table right here, this original table right here. But there's no reason to be intimidated. I will show you exactly what's going on. So we will do a left join over to this table. We can call this logins past. And we're gonna join both of these tables, the subselect and then this table, on customer ID. So on customer. So on logins.customer ID equals logins past.customer ID. And we're gonna do something interesting, right? So what we are trying to do with this join, or this self join right here, is answer one fundamental question. We know that this customer logged in on this date, but we want to see if they logged in yesterday as well. Because if they logged in both on today and yesterday, then you know that they are logging in consecutively. If they logged in on this date, but they didn't log in yesterday, then we know that they're not logging in consecutively. And we'll use that logic to build those two trend lines to add to our Dow area chart. Okay, so I'll show you how to do this in the join logic now. So what we want to see is, from our second table, this table right here, is the login date equal to the login date in our first table, in our subselect, minus 1 day, meaning yesterday. So it'll be date add, interval, -1 day. And let's review this one last time. So we have this subselect, right? That's returning data, that's returning customers, customer IDs, and their login dates. And then we're joining back to this table here, and we're joining on customer ID and customer ID here. And then what we're also doing is we're joining on the login date from the second table equal to this date minus 1, equal to yesterday. So that's what we're checking. And in some cases it will return data, and in other cases it won't return data. And we will take that and put it in a case statement so that we can actually count and aggregate the number of users that have a consecutive login. Okay, so let's build the select on top here. Do this. Bring back the customer ID. We'll bring back, actually, we can do the final aggregation right here on the top. So we will do this. Logins.login date. And then we will do logins.customer ID. And we will do a count distinct here. And this is going to return DAO, so daily active users, or the blue part of our analysis or chart, the blue area part of the chart. Okay, great. So now comes the fun and tricky part, which is adding those trend lines. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna say this. Case when is not null, then Okay, so let's go through this one last time. We have our customers and their login dates. And what we're doing is we're joining back to the fact player logins table on customer ID. And then we're joining on the login date from table 2, having to be equal to not this date, but yesterday's date. And what this is checking is it's saying, hey, if this is not null, meaning if this customer logged in yesterday, then we're going to count them as having a consecutive login. If, however, this returns null and the customer did not log in yesterday, which is this right here, we'll say that they haven't been logging in consecutively. Cool. We'll say DAO in consecutive login streak, and then we'll just say DAO not in consecutive login streak. And then we're just gonna aggregate this information. And our query is effectively finished. So I want to do one more run through on the logic of this query so that we have full understanding of what's going on. So what we're doing right here is we're going to the login table and we're returning customers and their login dates for the last 30 days using this piece of logic here in our where clause. Then what we're doing is we're taking this data with customers and their login dates and we're joining it back to the login table on customer ID, and where the login date from the second table is equal to not this date, but yesterday's date, or this date minus 1. And then what we're doing is a value or a null is going to get returned here, and we are pushing that through these case statements here. So if the login date is not null, then we know that this player logged in both today and yesterday, meaning that they're logging in consecutively. If this date is null, then it means that the customer logged in today but not yesterday, meaning that they're not logging in consecutively, because if they had a consecutive streak, login streak happening, it would have been broken yesterday because they didn't log in yesterday. So great, let's run this. Fantastic, so here's all of our data. Let's go ahead and move it over to Excel. Okay, here we are in Excel, and remember our query returned these 4 columns, right? So what I did was I just created these additional fields here, which is percent in a consecutive login streak, so the percent of our DAU that's logging in consecutively. And then the inverse of that, which is the percent of our DAU that's not logging in consecutively. So all this does is it takes, DAO that's in a consecutive login streak, divides it by total DAO, and then the very same thing for the DAU that's not in a consecutive login streak, meaning they logged in today but not yesterday. Okay, so now we're ready to rebuild that analysis. So I'm just going to grab these fields here, and then what we want to do is this. Okay, let's add everything together. We want the area chart for the DAU, and then we want the other 2 trend lines to be on a separate axis. me make a few changes to the axis here to smooth out the volatility just a little bit. And here we are. Here is our final analysis. I think this is really cool, and I think it's a very simple way to bolster any analysis or any reporting that you have on DAU, or the size of the digital audience that's serving your online business. So pretty cool. We took a simple Dow chart and we added 2 trend lines. So these 2 trend lines again give you a better understanding of the engagement of your audience. So with just DAU or Dow, you have audience size, but now with these 2 trend lines, you know a lot more about their engagement. And in this specific demo business, you know that, okay, wow, pretty impressive. 40% of your audience is logging in consecutively, or they logged in both today and yesterday. And then obviously the inverse of that, meaning 60% of your digital audience is logging in more sporadically. But again, I'm really happy that you joined me on this tutorial, and I think it's a cool technique on taking a standard metric and making it more interesting with more context. Thank you very much. Have a fantastic day.